What's happening, internet fam? So I'm down here at the beach, and you know, I just finished recording a concert down there at Moonlight Beach, my little online YouTube concerts that I like to put on. I think this one's going to be a good one. I think it's going to be the best one yet. Nice setting, nice weather. I think I was getting good audio and video. So, but I got back in the car, and I was just barely starting to upload the videos, and I had a message from my good buddy Nick from the Bleeding Irish. I miss you, Nick, man. I'd love to hang out with you at some point. He's just a really good-hearted guy. I miss your brother too, man. Tell your brother I said hi. Your whole family. I like Nick's whole family. They're just real sweet people. And he asked me what my opinion was on mental health, and I thought, mental health, and you know, I wasn't sure if he like meant my own mental health, society's mental health, or you know, somebody specific's mental health. But I'm dealing with somebody who obviously has very, very poor mental health right now, in a way that's just like the ultimate nightmare, really. Nothing's quite like having your kids taken from you. It's the most painful, horrible thing you can imagine, and especially when you are somebody who has, you know, some people can drink the pain away, some people can, you know, do drugs and get the pain away and stuff like that. And I just, you know, I don't do any of that stuff at all. I don't touch it. I don't have meaningless casual sex with people I don't care about. I don't do anything like that. So I don't really have an outlet to deal with the pain of having my kids being taken from me very unfairly, and so I'm just suffering the full brunt of it, and it's rough. And part of the reason why is because, you know, I was married to somebody who was absolutely mentally extremely unhealthy for over 7 years, and I tiptoed around it for a while, and then, you know, at some point you got to call a spade, and you know, the problem is, it's, you know, it's not just an individual, you know, it's generational. You know, people have generational mental health issues. You know, most people who abuse children were themselves abused as children. Most people who have some kind of like horrible violent tendencies had that violence performed on them earlier in life, stuff like that. And so there's that to think of. But, you know, let's just zoom out a little bit more and talk about all of society's mental health. I don't know if that's what you meant, Nick, or not. I wanted a little clarification, but before you even asked for it, I decided, you know what, I'll go ahead and talk about mental health, because it's something I'm having to deal with directly right now. And so yeah, mental health it's screwed in this country. It's totally screwed. First of all, there's so many toxins and chemicals in our environment that right off the bat, you got to figure almost everybody's down 10 or 20 IQ points of where they should be. And I don't mean like, you know, any specific individuals or any specific group or race or sex or anything. I mean everybody is probably 10 or 20 IQ points below their potential IQ when they were born, which is just really sad. I mean, it's really, really sad. People say, oh, you know, we don't have a Mozart or an Einstein these days, or a Thomas Jefferson these days, and it's like, well, yeah, you know, there's fluoride in the water, there's chlorine in the water, there's aluminum in our food, in our vaccines, in our air, you know, all canned goods that have any kind of acidic base to them, they're leaching metals, and just so many toxins in our environment. There's no possible way that mentally we are at full capacity. You know, so if you test at, you know, a 140, which is genius level, you know, probably if you were born in a more clean environment, hadn't been, you know, fed, you know, toxins in your air, water, and food your whole life, you'd probably be a 160. You know, and then, you know, on the other end of the spectrum, you got people around, you know, with IQs of 70 or 80 or whatever, and you know, and you know, they'd probably be 100 or, you know, 110 or something if they didn't have all the toxins in their environment. So I mean, just right off the bat, I mean, our brains are physically damaged by the chemical pollution that we live in, and it's everything. It's the food, it's the water, it's the air. I mean, you know, mercury is a neurotoxin. mercury, you know, hardly even exists in nature in any kind of way that we're going to be exposed to it, but now it's everywhere. It's in our fish. I mean, it's in fluorescent light bulbs. If you've ever been near a fluorescent light bulb that was shattered, there was, you know, mercury vapor that you probably breathed in, and mercury is a terrible neurotoxin, and we're exposed to it now, you know, inevitably, inexorably, just constantly, continuously. And you know, 100, 300 years ago, mercury wasn't even, you know, something that people ran into, hardly. You know, unless you were a crazy chemist or something, you know. And now it's like everywhere, and mercury's a brutal neurotoxin, and they're still putting mercury in the flu vaccines. So even right now today, if you go get a flu vaccine, you're still getting a healthy dose of mercury. So it's just, you know, and that's just one thing, you know. And then when you zoom out and go past the chemical imbalances and the actual chemical destruction of our brains and what that's doing to our mental health, you know, you also got to think about the aspects of mental health that society weighs down on you, you know. When, you know, almost everybody has at some point been a victim of some kind of abuse, whether it's bullying or, you know, sexual abuse or something. I don't know anybody who came out unscathed from their childhood like that, and those are mental scars that, you know, that you can never really all the way get over. And when you've got that, and then you're already down 10 or 20 IQ points, it's like, boy, that's just a bummer, you know. I mean, you know, there's really no coming back from that. And then, you know, beyond the abuse that your peers and your family and you yourself put you through mentally, there's the other things about society and the media and how they're programming you. You know, like television. It's like when I see television, it's just so absolutely toxic. It's so hypersexualized, promoting, you know, violence and the most like grotesque, base version of sex. It's just like, ugh, it's you know, and it's constant. It's, you know, and it's higher contrast, higher volume, higher, you know, intensity than exists in real life. You're getting like this, you know, this concentrated violence and weird, deviant sexual energy constantly with you, anytime the television's on. It doesn't even matter what it is, you know. I mean, even like kids shows and stuff are like really weird and disturbing and warped. It's just like I can't watch any of it. I don't even watch TV hardly at all. And then you know, so there's that, and it's not just TV, of course. I mean, when you're in the grocery store and you're standing in line and all those magazines of like all these photoshopped, you know, babes, it's like, what does that do to your psyche, you know, to even see that every single day, every single time you go to the store? You know, it's like you're seeing these weird airbrushed figurine versions of people, and you know, none of them look like that in real life, you know, and of course you don't look like that in real life. And so for women especially, they get so, you know, programmed to think that they're so inferior and inadequate, and you know, and what's that mental scarring doing to them? You know, here they're already down 10 or 20 IQ points. They've already been abused as children, either by their peers or by their parents or by themselves or by their brothers and sisters, etc. And now they're, you know, now they got to stare at these, you know, unrealistic sex gods on the magazines and on TV and everywhere else. And it's just like, come on, man, come on. And the other thing is too, like the statistics of who's on television and in magazines and stuff. It's really bizarre. You know, there'll be people who are, you know, all of one age group. You know, if you're watching television, you're gonna watch, you know, 80 times more 20-year-olds than you're gonna see in your day-to-day life, because in day-to-day life, there's people of all ages, from 2 to 102. But when you're watching TV, it's everybody's in their 20s, you know, everybody's in peak physical fitness. And it's just really weird and disturbing. And obviously it's gonna play out to mentally affect how people feel about themselves, how they feel about each other. And then inevitably that plays out into relationships as well. So then you get a whole nother cycle of pain and misery from that, you know, whether it's your family relationships or your sexual relationships. You end up just completely twisted and, you know, with all these unrealistic expectations that nobody could ever meet, that aren't even sensible, that aren't even good expectations in most cases. It's just, you know, whether it's the rom-com that's clearly, you know, pointed at women, or the, you know, hyper-violent, overly sexualized, garbage action films that are clearly targeted at men. And it starts at an early age, you know? I mean, you can, there's aspects of the Disney films that have all this, you know, that's pointed at kids. And it's like, it's just gross. I mean, like, I'm watching the movie Frozen, right, with my kids. This is a few months ago now, back when I got to hang out with my kids. You know, the character, the male character, the love interest character in the film, by the way, it's now her second love interest in the film. So already we're kind of teaching her that it's okay to go from guy to guy to guy. And we're also trying to teach her that, you know, that the guy who's got, like, you know, poise and confidence and has his stuff together, that, like, he's somehow inferior. Like he's naturally going to be like some kind of evil psychopath, according to the Disney model. Whereas the guy who's like goofy and, you know, sleeps with a reindeer and, you know, talks to rocks, like he's some kind of great catch, you know? So, I mean, you know, even in the movie Frozen, it's like, what are we programming our young women to look for? How are we programming them to find, you know, an optimal mate later in life, you know? I mean, and, you know, 3-year-olds love Frozen. You know, they're watching that all day, and how does that programming affect them? How does that affect their mental health? And speaking of 3-year-olds, I mean, the studies have been done as far as what to do with tablets and toddlers. You know, if a toddler has access to a tablet all day, it turns them into a sociopath. I mean, the jury's not even out on that. The studies are in, and that just is what it is. And something like 80% of toddlers own their own tablet now. So basically, we're raising an entire generation, 80% sociopaths. That's what we're actually actively doing right now. So, yeah, just you know, feeding everybody poison, both through their food, water, air, but also into their eyes and their ears. And also in their interpersonal relationships, just poisoning everybody constantly, and then giving them completely unrealistic expectations. And then when you don't meet those expectations, you know, trying to make people feel bad, you know, or trying to make them not feel bad for expectations they should have, you know, like this whole thing with, like, you know, fat shaming and stuff. You know, like, fat shaming is this horrible thing now. You can't call somebody fat, or you're, you know, incredibly insensitive and rude and everything else. It's like, hey, they did it to themselves. You know what I mean? They're fat. They ate that over that high volume of food. They didn't work out. You know, they have a lifestyle that is leading to them to be unhealthy, unattractive to the opposite sex, and unhappy. So, you know, saying that doesn't make you a jerk. You know, I mean, it shouldn't. I mean, in certain circumstances, maybe you shouldn't say it. But, I mean, the reality is, it's like, they need to stop eating. They need to fast all day, you know, and maybe only have one meal a day or something. You know, but now it's like, everybody's a winner. You know, if you're fat, it's not your fault, you know, even though you're sitting there eating, you know, Twinkies constantly or whatever, you know. It's just like, our whole society is so twisted and warped. So yeah, I mean, mental health, I think, is the #1 issue we have going on today. Ahead of everything. Ahead of the, you know, Federal Reserve, the meaningless wars where we're using robots to kill children in the third world. You know, and that's another thing. I mean, the glorification of war in this country. You know, like this weird respect you're supposed to have to anybody who's in the armed services, regardless of what they did in the armed services, regardless of how old they might have been when they joined the armed services, and whether or not they thought that was a good idea later. You know, I mean, I have a lot of good friends who are veterans, but they are overwhelmingly not happy about being veterans. They wish they had, you know, not went into the military. They're not ashamed. They're not proud of the time that they spent there. They're in some cases ashamed of the time they spent there, and the fact that they were even in at all. You know, And yet in our society, it's like, you must absolutely respect veterans, you know? Even ones who, you know, had a desk job for 20 years, you know, and have no spine whatsoever and raise their children horribly. You know which veteran I'm talking about. Yeah, you know which one I am talking about. You should feel bad, you slime. Anyway, it's just like, you know, and it's just the glorification of war, you know? Every movie has, like, you know, these war scenes, these war heroes. It's like, it's... You know, my kids are growing up in it, and they don't even have, you know, somebody like me to say, hey, you know, let's think about whether or not this is actually a good idea to watch that, listen to that, read that. I mean, now they're around somebody whose job it is to be in the military all day. You know, if you're in the military, it's your job to go kill people. How's that play for mental health? How's that play when, you know, when your kid's hanging around somebody who that's their job? You think that's mentally healthy for the kids to be around that? Statistically, it's not. Statistically, the men in uniform, and that's across all categories, police, all the branches of the military, firefighters, all of them, statistically, the history of domestic violence of men in uniform is like way off the chart compared to the rest of society. It's something like you're 60% more likely or something to have been engaged at some point in domestic violence if you're, you know, a man in uniform, if you have a man in uniform in your house, you know? And it's like, but let's not, you know, let's not disparage veterans, you know? It's just, you know, yeah. Good question, Nick. Let's talk about mental health. Let's talk about, I mean, we raise these kids and we lie to them about everything. We lie to them about Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, Jesus. We lie to them about all this stuff, you know? And whether you believe in Jesus or not, we lie to the kids about Jesus. All the religions do. I've read the book, you know, there's not a single religion who actually tells the Jesus story at all, in my opinion. And I've read the book a couple of times. And, you know, and we lie to these kids about everything. I mean, school lies to them about everything. And when I was in school, every single thing I learned was a lie. Almost every single thing was a lie. You know, history was a lie, for sure, you know, huge lie. I mean, the only thing that wasn't a lie when I was in school was math, you know? And, you know, what's the utility of math? Where's the application of that? You know what I mean? There's not really that much, you know, in your real day-to-day life once you get to be an adult. You know, there's addition and subtraction. It's useful to run a spreadsheet, stuff like that. So, side note, I never learned how to run a spreadsheet when I was in school. And they had that stuff back then. They had spreadsheets when I was in high school, and I never even saw one till after I was in college. I mean, I never saw a spreadsheet in college. I never saw a spreadsheet till I was, you know, completely out of school and out and doing something professional. And they're like, oh, hey, here's how we keep track of, you know, our budget or whatever. And it's like, man, what a useful tool is that? The spreadsheet's an incredibly useful tool. And schools don't even teach spreadsheets. You know, I mean, maybe they do now, but I'm sure it's like a subpar, you know, bad version of teaching it. You know, it's probably not, you know, they're probably not really showing you all the best, most useful ways to do formulas, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, and then, you know, and then the kids grow up, they start figuring out that all these things are lies, or they don't, you know, they just believe the lies their whole life. So what's worse for mental health, you know, believing the lies your whole life, or, you know, figuring out that they're all lies, and then, you know, being labeled a crazy person later? I mean, that's the great thing. I mean, you talk about 9/11, the fact those buildings exploded from the top down, or JFK, and the fact that obviously a bullet came from the front right and shot him, that's why his head went back to the left. That will label you a crazy conspiracy theorist, and yet, you know, you're 18, you drink heavily every night, you're just constantly focused on trying to bang anybody of the opposite sex that you can, as often as you can, and then you go sign up to go kill people in the third world who never did anything to you or your family. That's totally admirable, respectable, that's normal, that's okay, that's healthy, that's mentally healthy. But God forbid you call out, you know, these giant corporations, the Federal Reserve, everything else. No, now you're a crazy conspiracy theorist. It's like, mental health, you know, by whose definition? Who's defining health in that context? Society? Society lies about everything else. I'm thinking they're lying about mental health too, so. Yeah, anyway, I don't know. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for the Thanks for the feed on that. It's a good idea. We do need to talk about mental health. And what's the solution? You know, I mean, I'm more interested. It's easy to point out the problems with mental health. I think the tougher thing is to try and figure out some kind of solution where you can actually help people with their mental health issues, you know? I deal with a woman frequently who calls me and texts me and stuff. It's mostly a telephone-based relationship, but she definitely has some pretty extreme mental health issues, multiple personality disorder, a bunch of things, and I just try to be really kind and try to get her to focus on the positive. I don't, you know, and I'm not a mental health professional, so Nick, help me out. What do I do when this woman calls? You know, I try to be really nice to her, because I don't think very many people are nice to her. I don't think very many people even talk to her, much less are nice to her. And then I try to, get her to focus on the positive. I'm like, you got an apartment, you got a couch, enjoy those, you know. There are plenty of people in your situation who don't even have those, or are actually homeless out on the street for real, you know. So it's like, you know, yeah, I don't know. Is that the right play on that phone call? I really don't know. I really don't know. I do know that being in nature helps my own sanity and mental health. Swimming at the beach helps me. And I do know that any of the drugs that I've taken over the years, whether they were recreational or pharmaceutical or anything like that, did not help my mental health at all. You know, I mean, most of the drugs they give you for a mental health issue have neurotoxins in them. You know, Prozac has fluoride in it. Zoloft has fluoride in it. So, you know, all those SSRIs, they all have fluoride in them. I mean, I think almost all of them do. So here, you know, oh, you're crazy, we're going to feed you some neurotoxin, and then that's going to make you less crazy or just brain damaged and crazy. That's what we're dealing with here. That's what we're dealing with. I mean, you know, members of the family that I have to deal with in my super unfair situation that I'm in, they have a history of mental health issues, and they have a history of pharmaceutical drug usage, and they're nuts. You know, of course they're nuts. They've been popping fluoride and God knows what other neurotoxins their whole lives, and you know, and now when I'm saying, hey, can we feed my kids organic, you know, it's like suddenly I'm the crazy asshole, you know. It's like, oh, yeah, it's not the person with the, you know, the history of alcoholism and drug abuse and the history of pharmaceuticals, you know, usage and opiate usage, etc. No. I'm the crazy one for saying, hey, let's feed our kids organic here for a minute. Yeah, I don't know. You tell me, Nick. Why don't you post a blog, talk about mental health? I want to see your face. Or just want to see you in person, man. All right, take it easy, internet fam.